It's the 14th chapter of Mark, and I'm reading from the New International Version. Now, the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the..." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went out to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money. So he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. On the first day of the festival of the unleavened bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, telling them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." The disciples left, went into the city, and found things just as Jesus had told them, so they prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said, "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They were saddened, and one by one they said to him, "Surely you don't mean me?" "It is one of the 12, he replied, "one who dips bread into the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many," he said to them. "Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to Mount of Olives. "You will all fall away," Jesus told them, "for it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered.' But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter declared, "Even if all fall away, I will not." "Truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will disown me 3 times. Peter declared, "Even if they all fall away, I will not." "Truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will disown me 3 times. But Peter insisted emphatically, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the others said the same. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners." May the Lord add his blessing to the reading and hearing of his word. We're going to be looking tonight at the period in the Holy Week from about Tuesday through Friday, 3 hours of the morning, and you can follow that through the scripture. So let's just think about this. What in the world must the disciples have been thinking and feeling as they were living this last week with Jesus, as they're trying to understand what's he's saying and what he's doing and what's happening? I mean, it's already been a interesting beginning of the week. Now, these men have left their families and their jobs, and for the last 3 years, they have been traveling with Jesus all over the countryside of Galilee. And then suddenly Jesus says, it's time to go to Jerusalem. And we kind of talked about that in previous weeks, about why Jerusalem was probably the most unsafe place for Jesus to go at this time. But Jesus said, we need to go. So they went. In all of the gospel writers except John, who doesn't report this, they mentioned that the chief priests, teachers, and Matthew even mentioned the high priest Caiaphas. All of them were scheming, and that's the word used, scheming to get rid of Jesus. In fact, Mark tells us that the priests wanted to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him, but not in front of the people or during the festival, because they didn't want a riot. You know, Passover is an incredibly important festival in Judaism. And we're going to look at the Passover meal tonight in great detail. I have to admit, I kind of got carried away, but I found it very interesting, and I thought you perhaps would too. The idea of the unleavened bread, leaven has an association with sin in the Bible. Are y'all having difficulty? I keep hearing voices. No? Okay. You know, the Passover this week, the Passover in itself celebrates the deliverance of God's chosen people by God himself out of Egypt, the Exodus. He brought them out of slavery and out of oppression. And as we recall, it was accomplished through a series of 10 plagues, culminating with the death of the firstborn sons and animals. And of course, the Israelites were instructed to smear the blood of a lamb on the lintel of their doors using a bunch of hyssop so that the angel of death would pass over their house. And before the Israelites fled from Egypt, they had a very specific meal that they ate of roasted lamb and unleavened bread. The Jews, ever since that time, have commemorated this Exodus with this particular meal during Passover. And each time they literally through readings and blessings and various things they recite, relive that deliverance. So we're going to start tonight, right before the Passover meal, at the time when he doesn't stay inside Jerusalem. He doesn't stay in Jerusalem. He's staying outside of Jerusalem in Bethany. And he is at the beginning of our scripture, which is probably Tuesday, perhaps. We don't really know too much about Wednesday at all, but Tuesday, dining in the home of Simon the leper. And Mark tells us that an unidentified woman comes in with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume. Mark tells us she breaks this jar and pours the perfume on his head. Now, it's not unusual for hosts to put a few drops of perfume on guests, either as they arrive or as they sit down for a meal. That's a very common custom. This woman, however, breaks the jar. Now, whatever that might have meant to the host and to the disciples, to Jesus, it had great significance, since it's customary to anoint the dead with oil, break the container, and then lay it in the tomb along with the body. And you notice he mentions the fact that she is doing it for burial purposes. Now, everybody gets indignant that's there about how expensive the perfume is and how much they could have gotten for the perfume had they sold it, and then they could have given it all to the poor. Perhaps so. Perhaps they could have. And certainly if they'd given it to the poor, that would have been a really great thing. But I think if Jesus were here to say something, he would say they still didn't get it. They still didn't understand what was happening. And I think we can take that from his response to them when he says to leave her alone. To leave her alone, and why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. Think about those words from Jesus. She has done a beautiful thing to me. And then he goes on to say, you're always going to have the poor among you, but you're not always going to have me. You're going to have the poor and you can help them, but you're not always going to have me. And then he says she did what she could. She poured perfume on my body, preparing for my burial. And then he even goes so far as to say, I'm telling you this as the truth, that wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done this night will be told in memory of her. That's incredible. This small act, he is saying it will be told throughout the world. Now, I did a little research because, I don't know, I guess I need to get a life, but I did a little research on the comment about you'll always have the poor among you. And I was just curious, and it refers back to a time in Deuteronomy when Moses is more or less giving guidance to the chosen people, giving out the law, giving out God's wishes. And in this particular instance, Moses is telling the chosen people, here's God's message. He's talking to them about the canceling of debts that's supposed to occur every 7 years. And the purpose of canceling the debts every 7 years is so there are no poor people in the land God has given to them. That's how God intends to keep everybody at a more or less equal status. He didn't want there to be any poor. That was God's desires. So Moses goes on and encourages them to help the poor all the time, give to them freely, and do so without a grudging heart, and God will bless you. But here's the thing. It appears that maybe Moses was wise, no doubt about it, and realized that there's going to be a difference between what should happen and what does happen. And perhaps he already feels like the people will not fully obey God's guidance and desires and fall short of what God wants them to do. And so they will not cancel the debts and give generously. So there will always be the poor. And even until today, there is a poor. So that's why Moses then says, there will always be poor in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward the poor and needy in your land. And we have Jesus echoing his comments here. There will always be poor for you to help. I might pause here because when I was doing this research, I had a moment where I thought, oh my gosh, how many times do we talk about the 613 laws that the Jews just went out of their way to obey? But a couple of God's guidances, a couple of things he wanted them to do, they didn't ever touch it. This is one of them, canceling debts after 7 years to keep their being poor. And then the big one was the year of the Jubilee. Every 50th year, all the land would go back to the original owners of the land. That was God's way of keeping everything equal and resetting everything to the way he intended it, which is clearly that people would have land, have a way to take care of themselves, and not have to be dependent on others. The Jewish people never got around to making good on either one of those directives from God. Now, I wonder what the disciples thought when Jesus said to them, she's done this beautiful thing, and praises her, and talking about preparing his body for burial, rebuking the disciples for wanting to sell the perfume to help the poor, when it sounds like something that Jesus would have been totally in support of. There's a lot of things going on in this week, and I can only imagine that the disciples were having a great deal of difficulty processing all of the different signals that they are getting from Jesus and just trying to interpret his actions. Now, right after this, Mark tells us that Judas takes off and goes to see the chief priests, specifically to betray Jesus to them. And in Matthew, we're told that Judas asked them, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? Mark tells us, oh my gosh, the chief priests were delighted to have this person come forward, willing to work with them and deliver Jesus. And they agree to give him money. Matthew tells us it was 30 pieces of silver. So from then on, the scriptures tell us Judas waited for an opportunity to hand Jesus over when no crowd was present. So now the scripture moves us on to the day of the unleavened bread, which is the Thursday, the Passover meal. And that's the day when the Passover lamb is sacrificed. And Jesus and the disciples make some plans. Now, the disciples ask Jesus where he wants to take the meal, likely thinking that he might want to stay outside of the city where it's safer. But the custom was to eat the meal in Jerusalem. So it may have surprised them when Jesus indicates that he wants to indeed eat it in Jerusalem. So Jesus sends two disciples. Some speculate it was Peter and John, because Peter and John were really beginning to assume positions of leadership and responsibility, but sends two disciples into the city. Mark tells us, and Luke does as well, he says, go in the city and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. And then when he enters a house, say to that owner, the teacher asks, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And then he'll show you the room. It's all furnished. Make the preparations for us there. Did anybody notice anything kind of strange about that? I mean, did that seem kind of odd to you? You're going to walk in and you're going to be looking for a man carrying a jar of water, and then you're just going to follow him? I don't know about you, but I had this vision of how spies have code words with the person that they're meeting to exchange some secret or some documents or whatever. It's just a little bit odd. And the other thing that's odd about it is, no offense to all the women who are here, including myself, women usually carry the water around in the jars, not men. The whole thing was a little odd. Nevertheless, they find the man, they find the room, they prepare for Passover. When evening came, they all gathered in that room, Jesus and his disciples. And when they were all eating, Jesus just says, truly, I'm telling you, one of you will betray me. Talk about a downer on Passover. Imagine how 12 people who had just spent 3 years living and working together, hardly out of each other's sight, would handle that comment. One of you will betray me. Their heads must have been spinning. How could it be that one of them could possibly betray their beloved teacher? And so they begin what you would expect. Surely you don't mean me. And I imagine you can hear all these voices saying, surely you don't mean me. And Jesus says, it's one of the 12, one who's dipping bread in the bowl with me. And then he says the most interesting thing. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better if he had not been born. In other words, Jesus says, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that one will betray me. It's not going to change a thing. I will go just as it is written. I will go as my Father has said. It's not affected at all by this betrayal. But this traitor, it will be very bad end for him. Woe to him. And then Judas says, well, surely you don't mean me. And Jesus answers, you have said so. Now, we have, in effect, I think we have this, Jesus and his disciples pretty much celebrating what the Jews would call their Seder meal, their Passover meal. And these men, being devout Jews, have probably done this every year of their lives since they can remember. Had this very meal, gone through all of the traditions, all of the blessings, all of the reciting of various psalms and whatnot. And traditionally, this meal is observed in a home situation, not in a synagogue, not in the temple, but in the confines of a home and a family, because that is really the basic place and atmosphere that the Jews pass on the story, teachings. This is buried in the it's in the Old Testament that each family father passes these things down. So this is really a family kind of situation. So was this really a Seder meal? Well, I think we can say it's very, very similar because the food is very similar. But there's some couple of things that I just want to call your attention to about this meal. And this is in my category. Yes, I did go down a rabbit hole because I found this fascinating. First off, Jesus at this point deliberately, I mean by this deliberately, introducing a whole new concept of family. He's with his 12 disciples that he has chosen. They're all not related by blood. There's some brothers, but they're all not related by blood. They are not what is traditionally a family. But Jesus may be introducing the concept of celebrating beliefs in the context of a family of believers, not necessarily flesh and blood, but a family of believers. which really reminds us of what we do when we celebrate and observe the Lord's Supper. So as the regular Seder meal would progress, as I said, there would be readings, there would be blessings. I don't want to call it a script, but there are things that are done the same way, year after year after year. We don't know if any of that was done, not at all. But I will tell you, there is a body of literature that's immense about the similarities between the Seder, the Last Supper, and our Lord's Supper. That's fascinating. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about it, to point out a few things about this Last Supper, just for you to think about. Normally, during this meal, this Seder, I said earlier, they live out the Exodus. They review all of the parts of the Exodus and go through it. Remember, this is celebrating, this is recognizing, and this is remembering what God did for them. They don't ever want to forget what God did for them. So they have bread. They have unleavened bread. It's matzah. We call it matzah. And the Jews called it, in the context of the Seder, the bread of affliction, because the bread represented the awful tasting bread that the Israelites were forced to eat in Egypt while they were in slavery. And when they eat the matzah, the Jews eat the matzah during this Seder meal, the leader will say, "This is the bread of affliction that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are needy come and celebrate Passover. This year we are here. Next year may we be in the land of Israel. This year we are slaves. Next year may we be free." And this is what they say as they eat the bread. Jesus, when he takes the bread with his disciples, they might be expecting to hear something very similar to that. They've heard it every other year of their lives. But instead, Jesus, after he'd given thanks, he takes the bread, he breaks it, and gives it to his disciples, saying, "Take, eat, this is my body." Jesus changes the whole landscape, the whole concept of what is happening in this Seder meal. It's a whole new covenant that he is introducing to them. The wine element of the meal. In the Seder, there are 4 cups of wine, 4 specific times when people consume the wine during the meal. The 4 cups have names. They're the cup of sanctification, the cup of deliverance, the cup of redemption, and the cup of restoration. The first 2, sanctification and deliverance, are consumed by all the participants at a time during the eating of the meal. The last 2 cups, redemption and restoration, are after the meal. Many believe that after Jesus takes the bread, breaks it, and they all eat the bread, that we are now at the cup of redemption moment in the normal, traditional Seder meal. And so when Jesus picks up the cup, that would represent the cup of redemption. During a Seder meal, when they consume that wine, that cup of wine, the leader will say, "I will redeem you with my power," meaning God will redeem them, free them from sin by the blood of the Lamb that they just put on their doorpost. But Jesus takes this cup after giving thanks. He lifts the cup of wine and he says, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Truly, I tell you, I will not drink again from the cup of the fruit of the wine from now until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Isn't that amazing? So that is the end of the, isn't that amazing? So that is the end of this meal. they sing a hymn, and they leave the room. The meal is finished. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about that last cup that Jesus doesn't drink. Well, first I'll talk about the one he does, the cup of redemption, the one that he actually says to take this and drink it. His blood, the new covenant, poured out for many to redeem them for the forgiveness of their sins. Does that not sound like a cup of redemption to you, if you're going to describe it? And then when he goes on to say, I will not take another cup, many believe he's referring to that fourth cup, the cup of restoration, which during the Seder meal, when you drank it, the toast was, I will take you as my people, meaning God will establish them as a nation in the promised land in fulfillment of the promise he made to Abraham. That's what it means during the Seder meal. Now, Jesus doesn't drink a fourth cup of wine, but he says, I will not drink again until the day I drink with you in my Father's kingdom. Or he won't drink it again until God's people are restored back to God, which happens when Jesus is crucified, buried, raised from the dead, and returns again to bring us home. That's when he will drink again the fourth cup, perhaps of restoration, when we're all restored to God's kingdom. You recall when we, at the completion of taking the bread and wine during communion, we say, whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the saving death of our risen Lord until he comes in glory. Now, I found the whole comparison fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I have really come to believe that Jesus was taking the Seder to a new place based on his being sent by God down to earth to live among us and then to die in our place, to restore us. Fascinating. When they leave this meal, and I think Jesus deliberately wanted to leave the upper room, Jesus says to them, you're going to all fall away. I will strike the sheep and the sheep will scatter. And then he says, after I've risen, I'll go ahead of you into Galilee. And Peter, who can never be quiet, says, hey, even if all of them fall away, I will not. And that's where you have the famous exchange where Jesus tells Peter, well, I'm telling you, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny knowing me 3 times. And of course, Peter will have none of that. Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. All the others say the same. And that is a sad moment, I'm sure, for Jesus, because he knows what will happen. Jesus wants them to go with him to Gethsemane to pray. The disciples sit and wait, and he takes in Peter, James, and John, the same 3 he took with him up to the mountain for his transfiguration. He takes them a little farther along, closer to where he's going to pray, and for them to keep watch. Now, I think this part of the scripture is interesting. Again, I say I don't think he wanted to be arrested in the upper room. I think he wanted to put distance between that time and what he knew was coming. And I would ask myself and ask you to think about this as well. Would it be hard to believe that Jesus, and maybe think of him in his human side, is half human, half divine, that he would feel that it was too soon to go, that he was not ready to go to the cross yet, because there was still a whole world that needed to hear his message? Would it be hard to believe that he was feeling, he was very uncomfortable, probably feeling very sad about his disciples, that what they would have to endure without him. Were they ready? Had he prepared them enough that they would be able to hold together when they needed to hold together? Because after all, he's going to leave the whole thing with them to carry on. I don't know. He's half human. So in my heart of hearts, I believe you could have a moment where, I'm not ready because they're not ready. So Jesus does go on to say, when he's praying to his Father, Father, everything is possible to you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but you will. And he actually prays it 3 times, because each time he prays it, he goes back, he finds the disciples asleep, goes back and prays, comes back and finds them asleep. And the 3rd time after he prays it, he says, hey, enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. And pretty much that's where the horror begins for Jesus. At this point, we're in the middle of the night, the wee hours of Friday morning, like 2 o'clock in the morning on the Friday, when the horror begins and then just does not stop. I think sometimes when Jesus acts human, we are a little uncomfortable. But he is, after all, half human. I think sometimes we're a little uncomfortable because we can only see him as the Son of God. But he's also half human, the Son of Man. And he says, take the cup from me. And the cup here, and as well as the word hour, represents the crucifixion. He's not really talking about a cup of anything. And as a human, knowing what is coming, beatings, whippings, pain, nails through your wrist, nails through your feet, a long, agonizing, slow death. Is it any wonder that maybe in a quiet garden in the middle of the night, it's dark, everyone is asleep, that you would call out to your Father, asking if there is any other way to save his creation, any way to avoid the cup representing the horrors of the next 24 some hours? Is there any way? Yet at the same time, his divinity, I think, is also involved here, as he says, is there any other way? His divinity says, it's your will, not my will. And his divinity tells him that there is no other way. He has come to do this. He's come to do what only he can do. He's come to die in our place. And so his divine side understands and says, it is your will, it's not my will. So your will, not mine. But yet at the same time, I feel that there is a little bit of humanity as he cries out for deliverance, just as each one of us cries out for deliverance. And so I will end it there. We've come to the early mornings of Friday, and we'll take this story to the trial, I think is the next lesson, and we'll just leave it open to any comments, anything anything that anybody would like to say.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing that strikes me about this whole thing is I think Jesus knew all along the whole situation that was going to unfold through this time.
Sure.
He did.
And,
Sure.
and I think we see that human side, like you say. He talks about Peter's betrayal as just his general betrayal to the of the people, and he even describes the following the man with the jar of water, and it's almost like a narrative after the fact, but it's before the fact, and you sort of think that really shows that it's the divinity of Jesus, but also the disciples just don't quite get it.
Nope.
I think they're listening to him and they're deciding, what's going on, but they're really not, hearing what he's saying. I think we only see that through hindsight. But,
Well, pretty much
that's
what
a
he's
very
saying.
interesting part of the story.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of strange things that happen, and honestly, why would you believe that he's going to be crucified and beaten and killed and suffer? Why would you believe that? I mean, that's just, why would you kill a nice man like Jesus who's doing nothing but healing people? I mean, I can understand why it's hard for them to process what he keeps trying to tell them, because it doesn't make any sense to them.
Right.
Hey, Sid.
Yes.
About the man with the jar of water. You were saying that the people, usually the women were the ones carrying the water. How many women were there carrying water, and how many men? Probably would have been a whole lot easier to spot a man carrying a jar of water, a whole bunch of women, than to say, go follow a woman carrying a jar of water, and they're all carrying jars of water.
Well, you could look at it that way. That's true, because it was customary for the women to do it. But it was, this guy carrying the water would stick out like a sore thumb. Easy to find.
Easy to find.
He will be easy to find.
I really enjoyed the portion about the Seder meal and your comparison with the different parts of that meal as to what Jesus was going through. I hadn't quite seen it that way before, but I believe that's really spot on. Thank you.
I'm telling you,
I agree.
I did a lot of research about the Seder meal, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting what I think was actually happening there. And then, of course, there's what we know as our Lord's Supper, which is pretty close to what Jesus was saying, but a little different. I mean, because we take ours out of Paul's epistle. It's just a little bit different, but it's it's kind of fascinating, that cup of redemption and the cup of restoration. I don't know. Why did he say that if it wasn't in some form a kind of recasting of that remembrance, of that Exodus? And here's the new thing you need to remember. Here's the new thing that you need to remember and do over and over and over again, the same as you do. It was fascinating. There's tons of books written on it. There are.
Okay.
Knowing what we know now about what happened to Jesus, it was just such a sad time.
Terrible.
He knew, and he was so disappointed.
Yes, he was.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Love conquers all.
Yeah. I really thank you all for putting up with every form of technology problem possible, including my darn fuss. Pray us out of here. Gracious Gracious Heavenly Father, you sent your Son to die in our place, and what greater love is that? We can never, ever come close to expressing our gratitude and our love for the grace that you bestow on us so freely. Help us to be more worthy. Help us to grow closer to you. Help us to live in a more Christ-like way so that every person that we encounter will see Christ's love in us. We ask that you really help us mature as Christians during this period of Lent. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Night.
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 Good seeing everybody.
Again.
Here.
Night. Night. Night.